Hey everybody, Jenny and I made this video that's about becoming a keyframe artist. And it's just something that is my opinion, but hopefully it's a good overview that will help you on your journey to reaching that goal.
Okay, Alexander, if I want to follow your career as a keyframe artist, what is the first thing I should do?
I would recommend starting to create your own illustrations, your own stories in a form of keyframes, building up a large portfolio of personal work. Every day, make it a goal to create a frame. And before you know it, within a month, you'll have so much work to present.
Where should I begin? How could I start being a keyframe artist out of scratch?
Well, it depends, but where I started from was doing a lot of film studies and more specifically, watching a lot of movies. That's where, to me, my influence came from. Um, First off, I think you have to have somewhat of a drive and passion for film, for storytelling, uh, specifically through film, and I feel like that being ingrained in you will eventually reflect through your work. And as you're doing film studies, compositionally and value-wise and color-wise, you will gain a sensibility to eventually start creating paintings um, like your personal work.
How do I do film study? How do I do painting?
If you
I,
go even back further, it's good to have a foundation before you even get to that point of figure drawing, figure painting, and basic composition. And there's great classes that you could take, especially now online with Concept Design Academy or Schoolism or
so what do I look for when I have to take classes online? What should be on the title?
that's a difficult one because there's uh, for foundation, it's you want to take figure drawing classes, figure painting classes, and landscape painting classes. Landscape painting um, is a great one for film studies because it teaches you the fundamentals of composition when you're drawing and painting from life. I don't know if there's actual film studies classes anywhere, but uh, I feel like certain entertainment illustration classes that you could find might incorporate that. I myself used to teach a class called Keyframe Illustration, and I would start it with film studies. But the requirements were that you would possibly have um, landscape painting, figure drawing, and some type of basic knowledge of composition, because that would make the film studies go smoother for you.
So I do that and then next understand color or
It's you would understand while taking those classes. I think you also learn value and color um, on a basic fundamental level, and from there on, it you can probably go on more intricate levels of learning color. Um,
is that necessary to learn even intricate colors? Probably, right?
Probably it's entirely up to you. But the interesting thing is that uh, when it comes to creating cinematic work, color tends to somehow be a little bit more simplified and uh, not so much more abstracted like in contemporary art and contemporary paintings. The way we perceive cinematic work in a painting is different from how we perceive, let's say, a landscape painting for a gallery show. The way we show color in the painting like that will be a lot more exuberant than how we show color, for example, for a film shot.
Okay, so after I learn landscape painting, what's next?
You look for that class that can offer you knowledge about uh, film studies and composition. And I think storyboard classes actually have that, or some type of cinematic narrative. Or
Have you taken a storyboard class?
I have not, but I know people that have. Yourself, for example, and friends of mine, they speak strongly of it. That you also gain the knowledge for cinematic composition and just basic thinking on how to utilize the 180 rule and how to tell story in a sequence, let alone a single shot.
But in your viewpoint, in your experience, you haven't taken a storyboarding class, so how did you manage if you haven't taken one?
I did do storyboard work in the past, and uh, it wasn't as high professional as an actual storyboard artist would do their work. But yeah, I kind of learned from my director and seeing what they needed and learning on the spot as to what exactly the use of the storyboard is. It's not at that time it wasn't just pretty drawings or pretty paintings. It's actually telling us how to simply tell a story and get a cheaper budget out of it, or a more expensive budget. But I that doesn't mean I learned storyboarding. I got a sense of what that is. What helped the most is because prior to that, I had always been looking at film and looking at how things were shot and listening to director commentaries and what they thought about when they were shooting their movies. So that helps a lot too. Is diving into that.
In your keyframe illustration, how did you implement what you learned from the storyboarding job?
What helped me was the pressure of the time limit that I had, pushing me to eliminate any extraneous thoughts that would have slowed me down. So I would stick directly to the point of what the client needed, for me to communicate the story. And this was just pencil on a sticky note. Let alone in the future when I did with just black and white digital painting. Um, they didn't want, for example, with the digital painting boards, they didn't want me to get too far off into the deep end and render things out. They just wanted very simple black and white blocking. The reason is the main reason was to get the pacing of the story. When we look at all the 70 or 80 frames as in a whole on a huge printed spread, we see how the story plays out and how much light and dark there is in the frame, how readable it is. So um, that benefits an artist a lot because from that you gain a mental perspective when it comes to creating more extravagant frames in the future, because you always ask yourself, okay, what will read the fastest? And nowadays, when I create a keyframe, I want to make sure that the keyframe is recognizable immediately and there's no confusion when I'm looking at it, even at a glance. I want the director, whoever's looking at it, to immediately know what they're in for.
Do you remember any specific class that or teacher that really helped you in keyframe illustration?
In art center, I had a class called visual communication. Oh, I don't remember, but the teacher was a substitute for Will Weston class, and I never really took Will Weston. And I forgot the teacher's name, but this was my college education. There was just one class I was able to take, and back then we didn't do it digitally. We did it on tracing paper with marker, and he would play a movie. I remember the movie we did. It was The Matrix, and it was the opening of The Matrix where Trinity is running from the garbage truck right before she gets hit in the telephone booth. And we would pause that moment and try to capture it in 30 seconds. So it was really more about studying the light, the immediate black and white imagery. In 30 seconds, that goes by like that, and it's so easy to get caught up in details. So it forces you to simplify incredibly. And then at the end of the day, you look at your work and you see how much you've done, and that is the training process, is to see your failures, so to speak, because then you assess it, and next week you try better. You practice in between that time and next week, and you try better to sort of with a minimal amount of time, get only the important information down so it reads clearly. So that was an important class, let alone the multiple painting classes that I took, head painting and figure painting. That taught me about not only value in color and seeing color with your eyes, but most importantly, the importance of simplifying big to small. In keyframes, I think that's important, is to start with a broad stroke and end with the smaller shapes. I generally don't like to go the other way around, start small and it just doesn't work out.
Have you ever taken a class of Marshall Vandross's?
I sat in on a workshop with Marshall Vandross and he taught about composition. And I did that several times. This is way back in the day. I don't remember the time, but he's a brilliant teacher. And I remember you took his class, and I remember seeing the work and the knowledge that he was passing on to you guys, and that knowledge had evolved even though he's still teaching a lot of similar stuff. The way he dived into that, I think Marshall Vandross is an amazing instructor for exactly this, actually, for cinematic. If you're looking to do cinematic compositions through painting, Marshall can teach that because he leans on storytelling a lot. He leans on mood and feeling, uh, and that's also something very important for keyframes. Keyframes should have that. It should have everything about life that you experience in a single shot.
Would you recommend taking a
Anybody else?
perspective class?
I would recommend taking a perspective class, yes.
Would you recommend taking an environment sketching class?
Environment sketching. I took an environment sketching class, and it was good to take that because it showed me how I can use perspective knowledge. However, environment drawing or painting is it's different from a keyframe illustration. I think the way I look at keyframes is how you would shoot it through a camera lens. The way we present an environment to the audience sometimes can feel very different from how a camera lens will capture it, especially if there's figurative narrative in there. But there's some great environment artists who also are matte painters. I don't know their names right off the top of my head. One of them is Kang Lee, and he also has done keyframe illustrations. And I to look at other examples of a good friend of mine, also Joel Chang. Um, he does amazing environment and also keyframe art. Um, they treat their environments more like shots, but they definitely design the environment around it being an environment. Um, I think with keyframe art, you can get away with a little bit more ambiguity, which in an environment piece, you have to sort of show the environment and spell things out probably.
What about Anthony Francisco's class?
Anthony Francisco hasn't taught in a while, but I did take his class. He taught it alongside with Kevin. It was a creature and character class. Those were cool. At that time, I didn't know what I was gonna get into. This was still my art center life, early art center life, college, and I didn't know if I was going to be a character designer. And I didn't really discover my strength in keyframe. So I just wanted to mimic what my idols were doing, that being Kevin and Anthony and Ryan Meinerding and their amazingly rendered paintings of characters and creatures.
So, what about other elements, other resources to help you in keyframe illustration work?
Resources. There are some great books on composition.
The other way, go like.
Some great books that I can recommend. I'm sorry, I'm not used to that. For composition and thinking about framed ink, and then there's also this one, which is called off the top of my head, I don't remember. Anyway, I also want to say that this is one way of doing keyframe art, which is what I do, and it's purely painting it and using photo reference. By the way, another great thing is to look at photography and collecting photo reference for yourself. You sort of build up a library of lighting and just beautiful art, if anything. Um, Many other artists incorporate 3D, and I don't have 3D in my skill sets yet. But a lot of artists use 3D to block out shots. That is a realm I'm not familiar with, but I would encourage any starting artist to also dabble into that. 3D can help tremendously. You yourself, you took
I
a
did.
Blender a bit, and I saw how much it pushed your mindset and thinking into a certain way, and how it improved your work. Granted, you might not use it as much, but still, you did it. I have yet to do that and incorporate it, and I'm not against it. It's just I feel like after such a long time of practicing what I've done, it's almost irrelevant if I do it or not.
How long do you think it'll take to finish a program of keyframe illustration?
That all depends on the artist and how determined and how much they're willing to push themselves.
If you would calculate it with your experience, how long do you think it should take someone to finish a keyframe illustration
To really
class?
build to film to finish
Finish like
an
a, let's
illustration
say there's a
piece.
program, there's a
Uh-huh.
keyframe illustration program that you're gonna make it yourself for a students to take, but based on your experience of how long it took for you to understand how to do keyframe, just to make like a ballpark, how long do you think it should take them?
It's a hard one, considering that it's the student is completely um, surrounding himself with film and all the right, he's in the zone for it, I would say 3 to 4 years. Otherwise, it would take a lot longer for you to sort of um, grasp and understand where this is coming from.
Does that include the beginning art fundamentals? When you include the beginning art fundamentals, how long will it take?
Yeah, it does, because in the matter of in the midst of practicing keyframe art, you're also practicing fundamentals, and you are weighing differences in your balancing things out and fine tuning things and seeing where you need to improve to make your keyframe, your final goal, look better. So let's say you create a piece, your composition's off, you go back and you study composition. Your figures off, go back and study figures, color, lighting, same thing. Studying those individually and then moving step by step towards your goal would probably take longer. So I would recommend starting exactly with your goal and attempting it and seeing how far you need to get the original attempt of the keyframe from here to whatever your model of example for yourself is, whether it's a Norman Rockwell painting or an actual film shot from a David Fincher film. It's good to be doing it all at once, and that might seem hard, but that's what it takes.
So, in a student level, how often should I watch movies? If
Every
you're a
day, I
student.
used to watch films every day. I don't do that anymore because of time, but every day I used to watch a movie.
How much research after you watch a movie?
How much research?
Or do you need to do any research?
Yeah, I mean, I would take screen grabs, or just I would do before screen grabs when I would pause my VCR or DVD. I just I do film studies. I would draw it in my sketchbook and draw it again and again until it looked nice, and that would make me remember it. Also, this is a little bit more of a psychological thing, but push yourself to watch films you might be afraid of watching because of emotional reasons, because it's things like that that will define your taste and sensibilities, and it will get you even more in touch. Don't be afraid of watching
Depressed movies.
darker films or films that you've been straying away from. Some people avoid romantic comedies, they can't stand it. Some people don't like watching fantasy films, they can't stand it. I would say watch those as well. Try it and try again.
What about depressing films?
Depressing films, yes, you want to watch everything. Depressing films for me helped me to understand what, and horror films as well, to understand why they are depressing. What is it about it? What is it about that shot that evokes such an emotion? And there's no dialogue, there's no music. It's just a still shot of something, and it already makes you feel something.
But be prepared, right? Because it'll affect you for maybe a week.
Sure, yes, but at least it'll affect you. But look at it in a positive way. You look at why it affects you, and maybe it's triggering real emotions and memories from life. At that point, use those for your own work, because as artists we take in from our life and world and we reflect it into our work. I feel like that's a very important thing to know. um, it's one that's a great way a lot of filmmakers and a lot of painters have done masterpieces after masterpieces.
So now that you've done all those and finished school, what are you gonna do next?
uh,
time for your, maybe that means you need time for yourself to reflect and kind of soak it in.
Well, it depends at what pace you're going at. If you really want to hit the ground running, you um, you share your work on social media like Instagram or on the internet art station. You just start to upload your work. People start becoming aware of you, and you get the exposure you need little by little. You're going to start getting job offers.
So, what kind of work should you be sharing?
Exactly what you want to be doing. If you want to be doing keyframe, you go after and you present keyframe art, cinematic art, whatever is in your heart that you want to do. You don't stray away from that. You don't show anything else. My entire portfolio from day one has been keyframe, keyframe, keyframe. I very rarely put a character or prop or vehicle, and I've done those as well when I was starting off. Because clients didn't immediately trust me for just keyframe art, but I showed them. I showed them without asking. I proved to them, hey, look what else I can do in the right way, in the right moment, without wasting their money or time. I present them. Let's say they asked me to do a hammer for a video game. I showed them the hammer displayed as if it was a shot in a movie. Hammer on a table. How would you frame the hammer on the table? How would you tell some type of mood and story behind the hammer? And at the same time, you're designing the prop. And I would explain that to my art director. And I think that gave them more confidence in, okay, why don't you try a keyframe? You have to find that subtle transition, that sensitivity to also how to communicate that aspiration to the people you're working with. So um, that'll all come from within. You will feel it.
So, if there's a checklist to make a keyframe post in Instagram or in ArtStation, what do you think it should be?
To make a keyframe post, definitely on the top, tell story, mood, and the composition. The composition should be cinematic. Keyframe doesn't always have to be painted. A keyframe could be drawn entirely in pencil, but then there's mood behind it. Whether you draw the lighting, it'll obviously be in black and white or monochromatic, unless you add a variety of color pencils, for example. But if you're painting it digitally, you can definitely check off everything from storytelling, color, lighting, and mood.
When they're looking for a keyframe artist and they have to only hire one or two, and a lot of people have applied for it, so now the person that's hiring has to look through it. What do you think they're looking at to, from 10 people to hire only two? What are the characteristics that they would pick over the other?
Characteristics. I think the quality of work for one, how high quality of execution the piece is, and also the feeling and story that you're evoking. How well are you telling the story? Even if it's a simple story, you don't have to overthink things. The story could be um, man stranded on the side of the road. That is the story of the piece. But how well are you presenting that with everything, with composition, lighting, color, the mood, the feeling behind it, and yeah, I imagine that that's what they'd be looking for. How
In the, when you were hired first time as a keyframe
Mhm.
illustrator, why did you think they hired you the first job as a keyframe illustrator?
Because uh, they told me personally that I evoke uh, a very unique mood and feeling through my work, and my work is evocative. I pushed myself to create things that scared me or that were hard for me to talk about verbally. So I did it through paintings.
How many pa- painting was up there the first time?
In my portfolio,
Yeah.
many.
How many? Okay. Too many to count.
Too many to count off the
Okay.
top of my head. Yeah.
What about in Marvel? What do you think got you the job as a keyframe artist?
I feel like it was the same thing. Um, the mood, the feeling, ability to tell evocative story, but also, and also how I executed the paintings, but also the curiosity from the supervisor hiring me on how would I be able to translate and do in a Marvel-like universe environment, and that evolution, so to speak, was also a valuable thing to learn for me. It didn't change me. It added on to my skill set on how to treat something for a Marvel film as opposed to a David Fincher film.
Any guidelines to follow in order to produce a good portfolio for a keyframe artist?
Um, yes, make sure your composition is interesting, your story is evocative, and your mood, which encompasses composition, lighting, and color, comes from your heart. It comes from your soul. You created that with everything that you have. And that will drive you and push you to even dig deeper. You'd be surprised how much you will discover about yourself.
Any mistakes you've learned that made you a stronger keyframe artist?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's not necessarily a mistake, but an improvement to how dark my work was visually, how much darks I had. I made an adjustment in sensitivity to create a little bit of a better contrast control, so my pieces didn't look so difficult to read on a computer screen. So making my pieces brighter, but that's a personal adjustment. Not everybody has that issue. Um, Also, incorporating photos and photo bashing, I started to steer more away from that and try to learn a better way to use photos in my work, which is nowadays more about looking at the photograph and picking and choosing what to paint from it, as opposed to just plopping in a photo and leaving it as is and calling it a day. That's sometimes that could stick out like a sore thumb and ruin. It could be distracting to the viewer.
What about paintings that are muddy? Do you? I always hear that muddy term.
Yeah, yeah. Muddy paintings involve a lot of things that are overlooked, be it values. Mainly, it comes from values and how much grays there are, and there's no high or lows. So, too much middle ground values in a painting, you won't be able to tell unless you have graphic specific shapes that are accenting the focal point, or light and darks to create a good range of light. That's for one. Another muddy is too many colors. Uh, it becomes too splotchy, too watermelony. Like every color in the rainbow in a painting is it's probably doable, but it's highly recommended for you not to do that. It's good to limit your palette. Um, and also composition. Trying to cram in everything in one piece can be considered muddy. Oh, over cluttering for the sake of story. Everything happening at once. Bank robbery. The wife is pregnant, and the baby's coming out, and the building is on fire, and the airport is being hijacked, and all in one shot. No, maybe try to sell it in a sequence of keyframes, um, or simplifying the story. That's also considered muddy.
Is it hard for a student to overcome being muddy, or is it easy to understand?
It depends. I think it can be hard if you don't understand the idea behind simplicity, but I feel like that's that's usually not a
Problem.
problem. Yeah, I think simplicity is one of the 101 fundamentals you will learn through every class you take. Simplification to the very end of whatever class you take, even if it's a master class in painting or rendering, they will still teach you simplicity.
What are the examples of being on the correct simplicity?
Simplification, grouping lights and darks in a painting, for example, telling a story and sticking just directly to the point of it. It could be a multi-figure composition, for example, but our focal point is only on this moment of the story. If it's about a girl taking her pills, it literally is framing her or boxing her in with the composition, and the composition itself is simple. It's just boxy. There's nothing else competing, no diagonals or circles or things swooping around. It's straight to the point. I think that's always something to remember in cinema. Things are simple because you're watching a frame, a shot on the screen, probably for no longer than 5 to 10 seconds before it cuts away to the other shot of the dialogue or whatever you're watching. Sometimes there's long takes, but even that is moving and drifting away, and you're seeing things play out. But the simplicity of it is that we're still following the character. It's all about that silhouette and how the environment is changing around him or whatever the theme is. Uh, it's always kept simple because the audience is smart, but we need to tell an effective story, be it a deep story, a complex story. We need to tell it visually, clearly, and for that to be successful, it needs to be simple. If you mute the movie you're watching, can you still tell us what's happening at least? You might not know what the story's about, but can you at least tell what's happening? I think that's what it boils down to, the essence of it.
When you were making your portfolio, where did you get your ideas from?
I got my ideas from old classic painters and also modern digital painters. Classic painters were Ilya Repin, for example, or Norman Rockwell, um, and the modern painters being someone like Justin Sweet or Craig Mullins. Um, they they were the ones that kind of opened my mind and eyes to that world of like, wait a minute, I could, this could be my work. Why not? And then I started to become more aware that that had already existed, even through the making of the original Star Wars films. Um, Amazing work by Ralph McQuarrie and his paintings and matte paintings for Star Wars, telling stories. You know, Luke Skywalker fighting Vader, or that famous painting under the Millennium Falcon. Um, also, also Mobius being a big influence. Also, looking at films, of course, for my portfolio, I, I thought, why don't I treat everything that I put in my portfolio, which by that time it was online, like a snapshot, a pause from a movie. Like you're watching a film and, oh, that's a great frame, pause it. That's how I wanted every piece that I did to feel. Because I felt that in me, I felt that drive, I started actually getting that response. I feel like that truly works.
Have you used this technique on applying it on your portfolio, also applying it on Instagram posts or even your work right now making keyframes, or is it different?
Yes, that is, I have never stopped using that technique. It always feels like I always strive for it to feel like it's a moment from a movie. And that being said, I'm very aware of what movies are like today compared to the movies I grew up with, which are from the 70s and 80s, and how they feel. Movies today are a lot more crisper, for example. The fidelity of light and color definition is much higher as opposed to old school films that were shot on film. Some of them have been remastered to 4K and everything, but either way, being aware of that, I've adjusted. Like I mentioned earlier about with working with Marvel and adjusting the darkness in my work and my paintings, have been able to still hold on to that essence because that's always an initial driver for me to make it feel like a moment from a film.
What about the essence from Craig Mullins, Justin Sweet, Mobius, what's the other one?
Ilya Repin.
Do you still use that
I
part of it?
I do. Those are probably more. It probably it's probably more of an execution in the work. I don't try to mimic their feeling or their style, if you want to call it that. I don't like using the word style. It's they have a heart and feeling behind their work. I don't want to mimic that, but I do try to study how they applied their brushstrokes or how they executed a certain type of noise to their painting or light. So I pull that from them as well. And to this day, I still am aware of that. Um, but I have to be honest and say that I mainly look at cinematography as reference. I have steered more into that direction more so than looking at the painters.
What about even Norman Rockwell?
But here's the thing: Norman Rockwell and the other painters, like Ilya Repin, again, they have great examples for facial expressions, but so do great cinematographers in how they shoot close up or a medium shot. I like to look at painters for that as well to see how they executed a painting or a rendering of face. It sort of puts you back in that mindset of learning more because of that growth that I had before in studying from those painters. I with a new mindset of keyframe art, it's sort of unknowingly have a different switch, and you start to pay attention to their work in a different way, and that's hard to explain. But when you get to your own zone, call it comfort level, you start to look at things differently. You start to look at art differently for what benefits you more. two different people, a character designer and a keyframe artist, could look at the same painting and they'll take something very different from it.
Okay, any final thoughts, message, and ending the video?
I I think you should always follow your heart and what you want to do as an artist, and never be afraid to try and conquer your fears through the art and passion that you're following. Thank you guys for watching this, and comment down below if you have any suggestions or questions. Hopefully this was informative and helpful to you all, and I wish you best of luck in a powerful journey ahead.